المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين، سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة الحجة ابن الحسن العسكري فداه أرواح العالمين. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها قليلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, the Avenger, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have been blessed since the beginning of the holy month of Ramadan to explore and examine the words and teachings and infinitely wise letter of the Commander of the Faithful to his son Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba, in which the Imam imparts invaluable advice to his son. And we reached this section of the letter that the Imam sent, in which the Imam says, وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ تَكُنْ مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَأَنْكِرِ الْمُنْكَرَ بِيَدِكَ وَلِسَانِكَ وَبَايِنْ مَنْ فَعَلَهُ بِجُهْدِكَ. Inshallah, we'll try and explain these beautiful and precious statements by the Commander of the Faithful one by one. The Imam says that you should command good and forbid evil. And we all know that commanding the good and forbidding evil is one of the most fundamental injunctions and what constitutes parts of our furu'ud-din. So just as salat and siyam and hajj and zakat and other acts of worship are integral to our faith, just as they represent branches of our religion stemming from the fundamental tenets of our faith, the usul, these are furu', and al-amru bil-ma'ruf, enjoining the good and forbidding evil, are in that same list. And so the Imam here reiterates that point, and he reminds us all that we should enjoin the good, meaning we should command others to do good. But the question is, what exactly is good? Because people have different takes on these moral directives. Ethics and morality represent different things to different people in different societies, in different communities. Perhaps different religious denominations have varying interpretations of what's good and bad. And what is really interesting in the wording that's used in both the Holy Quran as well as the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt is that they say we should enjoin al-ma'ruf. Even though ma'ruf is interpreted to be good, but ma'ruf in itself, at least if you go back to the root of the Arabic term, it doesn't necessarily mean good. Ma'ruf is that which is known. Munkar is that which is not known or understood. When you say Ankartu fulana, it means when I saw that person, I didn't recognize who he was. So munkar, in the foundation of the meaning of the term, just like ma'ruf, is that which is familiar, that which is understood, as well as the antonym of that, the opposite, that which is not understood, that which is rejected. The reason for that is perhaps because human beings have an intrinsic understanding of good and bad. If you asked anyone, irrespective of their religious affiliation, and regardless of which country they come from, what ethnicity they're from, everyone will tell you that to hit an orphan boy is evil, it is bad. In other words, this is known to everyone. And this is a reference to the fitrah, it's a reference to our primordial nature. We say primordial in the sense that this was given to us prior to birth. We were born with an innate understanding of good and evil. And while the manifestations, while the applications of this concept may differ in certain details, but generally speaking, people understand that disrespecting your parents is an evil act. Your parents who looked after you, who brought you into this world, who took care of you, who provided for you, who treated you when you were sick, who sacrificed so much of their time and effort and money, they are to be treated kindly. And so this becomes ma'ruf. And the same with munkar. So, the reason I'm saying all of this is when the Imam says you should enjoin good and forbid evil, the step that comes prior to enjoining and forbidding, prior to commanding and prohibiting, is to know what is good and what is bad. And oftentimes, people become too distracted. People might contaminate through their actions or through the environment that they live in their primordial nature. Their intrinsic knowledge could be tampered with. It might be contaminated, it might be polluted. And that is why they need reminders. That is why you have to tell them, listen, what you're doing here is bad, you shouldn't do it. Or that you should do such and such, because they might have forgotten, or they might have been neglectful. So, one of the points I'd like to mention about enjoining the good and forbidding evil is that it has to be preceded by knowledge, it has to be preceded by understanding before you enjoin the good, or as part of the process of enjoining the good, you have to impart knowledge on the ones that you're trying to guide. Tell them, speak to them, and clarify things for them. That's point number one. Point number two when it comes to enjoining good and forbidding evil is that the objective has to be to bring about an impact on that individual. Now, you might say this is obvious, but it's not always that obvious. Your intention should be to guide that person. Your intention should be, at least at first, you might say there are times when guiding the individual is not the objective. If someone is about to kill someone else, you're not trying to guide them by offering nice words of advice. You have to intervene physically to prevent them from committing this act. But generally speaking, in the context of the family, in the context of the community, the objective and the desired goal is to guide them. If the objective is to guide them and nudge them into the right direction, the approach that you take will also be influenced. In other words, you won't begin by being harsh and overbearing. Why? Because most of the time, when you treat people harshly, when you speak to them in a manner that insults them or hurts their feelings, they might double down on their actions. They might be pushed away from the path of righteousness. And so that is why the first thing you do, if you're going to enjoin good and forbid evil, is to do so in your heart, meaning that you disassociate within the deepest recesses of your soul. You acknowledge this act to be good, or you acknowledge this act to be evil. Once you've done that, then you speak to the individual, right? That's how it's understood most of the time. You begin by speaking to them, and you do so in a manner that is conducive to reaching that ultimate objective, which is to guide them. Not to hurt them, not to disrespect them, not to upset them, but to actually create an impact so that they perform the good and or avoid the evil. That's point number 2. Point number 3 is that when it comes to enjoining the good and forbidding evil, while we associate this act with advising others and speaking to them and preaching, the more effective method with which this could be practiced is through action. They say actions speak louder than words. Because when you personify good and when you avoid evil yourself, the impact of your statement and your preaching will be much more palpable and tangible. It will reach that objective, which is to guide the individual, much more so than if you just preached and spoke. In fact, in English, they use this expression. They say you're being too preachy, which means that you're talking and speaking in a manner that could be described as admonishment, right? A way that is sometimes associated with being harsh. But if you want to guide someone to upholding prayer, the best way to do that is to uphold prayer yourself. A father who wants to teach his children to pray, the best thing he can do is to perform prayers at home so that his children can see him praying time after time after time, and eventually they will internalize this act. They will come to appreciate it. Because a lot of children look up to their parents. They will do as their parents do. So the best form of enjoining the good and forbidding evil is to personify them. It is to act upon them. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam famously says in a hadith, Kunu du'atan lana, invite others towards us. Or the actual wording of the hadith is Kunu du'atan linnas, invite other people bighayri alsinatikum, without the use of your tongues. Because it's easy to preach about being good and avoiding evil. Everybody does that. Every religious leader does that. Every person of authority does that. Every president, every prime minister does that. But it's one thing to preach and speak to others, and it's an entirely different thing and a much more effective method that when you actually apply it yourself. The Imam says in that same hadith, كونوا دعاة للناس بغير ألسنتكم ليروا منكم الورع والاجتهاد والصلاة والخير. Let people see piety in you. Let them see how you struggle in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let them see how you pray. And let them see goodness coming out of you. In another version of the hadith, the Imam says, كونوا دعاة إلى أنفسكم. Be people who invite to themselves, meaning to our path, to our religion, to our faith. How? بغير ألسنتكم وكونوا زينا ولا تكونوا شينا. Be individuals that beautify this faith. The text, the scripture, the holy books are out there. But generally speaking, society wants to look at examples of people who have followed the scripture before they are encouraged to read the scripture. They want to see if I became a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, for example, what would I look like? How would my life change? How would my conduct be affected? And they see that in you. They see it in the adherents of this school. They see it in the followers of this faith. So the Imam says, Kunu Zaynan. Be means of beautification. Be adornments. And do not be bad examples. Evil adherents. That is one of the worst things you can do. You would repel others from the school of the Ahlul Bayt, from the religion of Rasulullah, by acting in a manner that is repulsive, that is grotesque, that pushes people away from this religion. Shaykh Muhammad Hassan al-Najafi is the author of an extended exposition on Islamic jurisprudence and fiqh, known famously as Jawahir al-Kalam fi Sharh Shara'i' al-Islam. The book is a 43-volume work in which Shaykh Muhammad Hassan al-Najafi explains and provides deductive evidence for a book that was written by Al-Muhaqqiq al-Hilli, known as Shara'i' al-Islam. Shara'i' al-Islam is very similar to what you would find in your marja''s legal manual or the Risala al-Amaliyya, right? Shara'i' al-Islam, which was written in the 5th century or so, is very, very similar to that. In other words, it's a list of do's and don'ts. So Shaykh Muhammad Hassan al-Najafi, Sahib al-Jawahir as he's commonly referred to, came and took all of those injunctions, all of those prohibitions, all of the list of do's and don'ts, halal and haram, mustahab and makruh, and he provided the evidence for it from the Quran, Hadith, the words of prior scholars, for example. So 43 volumes. When he reaches the discussion on enjoining the good and forbidding evil, he clearly states, he says that to enjoin good and forbid evil, you, above all, must apply those teachings. In particular for the people who want to preach to other people, he says you have to embody those values. This is much more effective than if you just preach to them. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen says, وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ تَكُنْ مِنْ أَهْلِهِ. When you enjoin the good, you will be among the people of good. Now, one thing I have to mention here is that scholars state, if someone does not practice what they preach, let's say a person who doesn't pray on time sees a group of youth who are playing video games. Now he feels that it's just adhan time, the mu'adhan has recited the call to prayer, And these youth are ambivalent. They're completely occupied with their video games. Now, the fact that I myself do not pray on time, should that prevent me from preaching to other people to do the same? Scholars say, no, it's not a condition. This is why I said it's more effective if you're someone who embodies these values. But it's not a condition. As a matter of fact, if you see someone committing an act of evil, someone committing a sin, and I myself am embroiled in that sin, God forbid I commit that sin myself, scholars say that if you don't prevent others from committing that act, you have committed two sins. You've committed the sin, the original sin itself, and now you've committed a new sin, which is that you did not tell those people to refrain from committing that sin. So it's not a condition, but obviously much more effective. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that if you are someone who calls others to do good, who enjoins good, then you will gradually, automatically come into the fold as well. You will also tell yourself, hang on a second, I just told this group of youth to get up and pray. While I don't do that myself, I better start doing so. Takun min ahlih. Then the Imam, when he speaks about forbidding evil, he says, وَأَنْكِرِ الْمُنْكَرَ بِيَدِكَ وَلِسَانِكَ. And when you prevent evil, do so with both your hands as well as your tongue. In other words, if the situation requires my physical intervention, I should do so. I shouldn't just speak the words and preach without taking action. There are times when you have to take action. وَبَايَنْ مَنْ فَعَلَهُ بِجُهْدِكَ. Bayana, yubayanu, means to keep a distance. The Imam says that the people who commit acts of evil and sin, you should keep a distance between yourself and them. This is a massive problem in this day and age, my dear brothers and sisters. The prevalent culture of the day is that you should let others be, and religion is a matter of personal practice. Religion is something that has to do with your inner beliefs, but do not impose your values onto other people. This is something that we hear quite often, but we know that to be patently false. We know that that is not acceptable. Even the most liberal individuals, you know, the secular types, the progressives, who tell you that you shouldn't impose your beliefs and your values on other people, they themselves will impose their beliefs and values on others. If they decide to make a certain abomination legal through an act of parliament or through a referendum, they then force it on other people as well. They shove it down our throat. They say you have to accept this. And if you refuse to hire someone that acts in a manner that is clearly contradictory to your faith and to your values, then you're committing discrimination. You'll have to pay a penalty, you might even go to jail. So even those who preach to us about personal space, about being triggered, about not forcing your values on other people, they are guilty of the same crime, if it is indeed a crime. Now, this is the prevalent culture. Our religion tells us, no. If you see someone committing an act of evil, you speak to them, you preach to them, you advise them. And if all of that doesn't work, you keep your distance from them. Like someone who has a communicable disease, a contagious virus. You don't say that, oh, she's my cousin, it's fine. And they've invited us to a wedding and I can't go and it's awkward if I don't. Keep your distance, Amir al-Mu'mineen says. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons evildoers and sinful people are encouraged to do so is because they don't see a reaction from the rest of society. Because they don't feel that anyone is objecting to them. But if they see a sufficient number of individuals who tell them time and again, do so in the most kind and compassionate manner. We're not even elevating action to physical intervention, but at least talk to them. Someone told me just the other day, quite recently, that I was in a different country, and they were telling me that in the family, I believe it was a set of parents or grandparents, they were saying that their grandchildren live in various countries across the world, and they have almost completely lost their faith. I said, you know, one of the problems is that in a family unit, we have this assumption in our heads that you should always be kind and accepting and embracing of people, no matter what their choices, no matter what they do, which is obviously unacceptable. If, God forbid, your son, your grandson was taking drugs, would you not speak to them? Would you not tell them that you are on a self-destructive journey? You will kill yourself. You will destroy yourself and those around you. As I said, it's a contagious virus and it's a morbid sickness. You have to talk to them. And if that doesn't work, the Imam says the last course of action is to simply distance yourself from them. Notice what we recite in Ziyarat Ashura. The Imam tells us, Subhanallah, Allahumma la'an awwala zalimin zalama haqqa Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa akhir tabi'an lahu ala dhalik. Oh Allah, curse the first to commit acts of injustice and oppression against Muhammad and his family. Sallallahu alayhi ajma'in. Sallallahu alayhi. Start from the very first and all the way to the very last. وَآخِرَ تَابِعًا لَهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. Then we say, اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين. Oh Allah, curse the ones who fought against Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. وَشَايَعَتْ وَتَابَعَتْ. Shaya'at is to accompany. In other words, شايعت بايعت تابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. Oh Allah, curse the ones who fought with Imam al-Hussein and curse the ones who accompanied them, who went along with them, who embraced them and accepted them. And even, according to many of our traditions, those who are pleased that Imam al-Hussein was killed. Which is why Allah will punish the ones who are pleased and happy with the murder of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, even if they're separated from the event itself by 10,000 years. They're exactly the same. Shaya'an is to accompany. You have to create a distance between yourself and evildoers so that you don't become their companions. You don't become people who follow them, even if you don't commit the act yourself. Then the Imam says, وَجَاهِدْ فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ. He says, enjoy the good, forbid evil, create a distance between yourself and evil individuals. Then he says, وَجَاهِدْ فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ وَلَا تَأْخُذْكَ فِي اللَّهِ لَوْمَةٌ لَائِمٍ. Jihad, we all know, comes in two forms. The first is internal struggle. Jihad comes from jahd or juhd. Struggle, something that's hard, something that's difficult, and the patience required to overcome that hardship. Both of these meanings are found in the word jihad. The Imam says, struggle in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, haqqa jihadih. As much as Allah deserves to have you struggle in His way. In other words, exert maximum effort. As we recite in the Ziyah of Abil Fadl al-Abbas, we say that you exerted maximum effort. There was nothing else that al-Abbas could have done and didn't do so on the plains of Karbala. To struggle in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala As I said, there is the internal struggle and the external struggle. There is struggle with the enemies who are trying to kill us, who are trying to harm us, who are trying to take away our possessions. That's one form of struggle. And the worst thing that can happen in that form of struggle is what? Is you get injured and you get killed. But the internal struggle is one in which sometimes you might have to be injured 100 times a day and killed 100 times a day. You have to constantly struggle with your desires. You're getting injured every time. You're getting hurt. And you're killing your desires by killing yourself, meaning killing those temptations. You have to die and be resurrected again, and die and be resurrected again. Which is why it is the greater jihad. It is much more difficult, having to face all of these struggles internally, as well as externally. So the Imam says, وَجَاهِدْ فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ وَلَا تَأْخُذْكَ فِي اللَّهِ لَوْمَةُ لَائِمٍ. And never be dissuaded in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never be dissuaded by people who admonish you. People who keep discouraging you. People who tell you, you shouldn't do this. When you know this is the right thing to do, and then you're doing it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't listen to other people. Other people don't care about you if you're swimming with the current. If you're simply going with the flow, they don't care. If you're stagnant, if you are not doing anything of value, they don't care about you. The minute you start to struggle, the minute you begin to progress further and further, that's when their harsh words will come flowing through to you. And the reason they do that is obviously they're motivated by different things, but one of them is that it's a difference of cultures, right? You come from a culture of piety, a culture of following in the footsteps of the Holy Prophet and his immaculate family. And so when someone comes from a different mindset, they will obviously not be pleased when they see you doing certain things. And I've seen this sometimes within families of people who are all Muslims. And the father tells his son, why do you pray this much? You're becoming an extremist. You're a Taliban now. The father, instead of encouraging his child, discourages him and even compares him to terrorists and extremists. The term extremism is so easily thrown around these days in the direction of people who are simply trying to abide by the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the instructions of their religion. We have a hadith in which the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa he says, Waylun, woe unto the children of the latter days, the end of times. Waylun li'atfali akhir zaman. So someone asks, Ya Rasulullah, woe unto the children, meaning that they will struggle a lot. From whom? Who's going to do this to them? Is it the evildoers? Is it the kuffar? Is it this or that? He said, no, min aba'ihim. This oppression will come to them and this confusion will be caused by their parents. Not from society, not from school, although that in itself is a huge challenge. But sometimes it's so bad that the children will suffer at the hands of their parents. Rasulullah then elaborates further. He says, because instead of their parents teaching them good things, instructing them to be upright and righteous mu'mineen, they don't care about their religion. All they care is about their grades at school. All they care about is about their degree from university. They care about the material things, but not their spiritual development. Woe unto these children. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, لا يأخذك في الله لومة لائم. Don't worry about other people's opinions. As I said, sometimes it's because they subscribe to a different value system. Sometimes the reason other people will approach religious and pious individuals and discourage and dissuade them is because of an inferiority complex. It's because they don't want to look bad themselves. If she does not adhere to the rules of hijab, right? If she puts a full face of makeup, for example, and comes across a young girl, her niece, her, I don't know, granddaughter, her sister, who is trying to abide by the rules of hijab and who avoids putting makeup on, for example, she will tell her, why are you being an extremist? Put on some makeup, put on some foundation. Try and remove the acne scars. Why do you look like this? Why do you look like a homeless person? In some cultures, someone came to me once, subhanAllah. She said to me, Sayyid, I am the only person in my family who wears hijab. My entire extended family. And when I put on the hijab, she said, it was my family members, not society, not co-workers, not my boss. It was my family members who told me not to. You're being an extremist. It's an inferiority complex. They don't want to look bad. Hadith tells us that when Musa came to Qarun and said to him that you should pay the alms and you should help the poor, Qarun was too stingy, even though he was Musa's cousin. He used to recite the Torah with a beautiful voice, the Hadith tells us. Right? He was so close to the very Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's money. It's money. And the more you have, the more stingy you become, the more miserly you become. Just like salt water, as the Hadith says. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says that the dunya, the pleasures of this world, are like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. Until it kills you. And you die of thirst. So, he doesn't want to give charity. He doesn't want to give the alms. But he also doesn't want to be singled out. He doesn't want to look bad. He doesn't want to stick out like a sore thumb, as they say. So what does he do? He goes around telling people not to give money. You don't want to give? Fine. Why discourage others? You don't want to wear the hijab? Why discourage others? You don't want to go to ziyarah and hajj? Why discourage others? He went around telling everyone, why are you giving your money to Musa? Because Musa is the one who takes it and disperses it and distributes it. Don't give it to Musa. How do you know Musa is a reliable individual? Which is why nowadays we hear what? These marajah, you're giving them your homes. What's happening to the homes? Who knows if they're being trustworthy and reliable when it comes to the disbursement of those homes funds? This is our money. We have to audit them. We have to audit the money. We have to have some kind of supervision. We need to have the accounts published. Whose money is it again? Isn't it the Imam's money? And isn't this marja someone that you chose to follow and emulate because of his knowledge and piety? All of a sudden, when it comes to money, he's not to be trusted. So Qarun goes around and he tries to sow these seeds of doubt in people's minds. Eventually, he resorts to something truly evil. Musa is delivering a sermon. He's surrounded by thousands of people listening to him. He pays a wicked woman who was a prostitute and says to her, take this money, I want you to do this instead. Get up in the middle of the sermon and say, Musa, you're preaching to us about chastity and piety and these sorts of things. Well, you were with me just the other day. Practice what you preach. And so she does exactly that. She gets up in the middle of the sermon. Again, the idea is what? Because he doesn't want to be the one who looks bad, he wants to make others look bad. Or even worse, to justify his action. The woman gets up, she says these words, فَغَضِبَ Musa alayhi salam. Musa became furious with her. And so he told her, listen, you better tell me the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth right now. Tell me, who paid you to do this? The woman became scared and immediately gave up Qarun. She said, Qarun was the one who paid me. He told me to do this. And so Musa makes a prayer. The Quran describes this scene. فَخَسَفْنَا بِهِ وَبِدَارِهِ الْأَرْضِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately commanded the earth to swallow Qarun, his palaces, his treasures, his money all at once. Sometimes people who dissuade and discourage you don't want to look bad, and that's why they do it. What does Amir al-Mu'mineen tell us to do? Don't listen to them. لا تأخذك في الله لومة لائم. Who cares what they say? If I'm pleasing my Imam, I don't care if the entire world is pleased with me or not. As Imam Rida alayhi salam said to his companion, he said, if your Imam he said to Yunus ibn Abd al-Rahman, it's a favorite hadith of mine which I mention all the time. He said to him, Ya Yunus, who cares if people are displeased with you? Who cares if they're backbiting and slandering you? إِذَا كَانَ إِمَامُكَ عَنْكَ رَاضِيًا. If your Imam is pleased with you, don't listen to anybody else. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen says, وَخُذِ الْغَمَرَاتِ وَخُذِ الْغَمَرَاتِ إِلَى الْحَقِّ حَيْثُ كَانَ. Khawd is to dive. Ghamarat is water that covers your head, meaning deep water. The Imam says, dive into the depths of the water in search of the truth, no matter where that takes you. إِلَى الْحَقِّ حَيْثُ كَانَ. No matter where it is, dive, struggle, be a brave person, be strong, don't shake, don't shiver. Don't be dissuaded by other people telling you this and that. No, have the heart of a lion and do the right thing no matter what happens. وَتَفَقَّهْ فِي الدِّينِ وَعَوِّدْ نَفْسَكَ الصَّبْرَ عَلَى الْمَكْرُوهِ. تَفَقَّهْ فِي الدِّينِ. These are perhaps the two most critical points the Imam mentions in this passage. He says, have tafaqquh. We all associate fiqh with what? With jurisprudence, with the legal instructions or the legal dimension of Islam. Halal, haram, makruh, mustahab, mubah, right? However, tafaqquh is broader than that. Faqaha means to understand something on a deep level, right? It means that as a Muslim, if I asked you who the first Imam is, you'll say Amir al-Mu'mineen. But do you have tafaqquh of Amir al-Mu'mineen's position? Meaning, do you have the evidence? Do you have the proof? Do you understand why Amir al-Mu'mineen is the first Imam? That's the level of understanding and insight that Amir al-Mu'mineen wants us to have. Tafaqqah fi ad-deen. I once asked someone, it was an interesting encounter, and as a result of the encounter, I ended up writing a whole book. I came across an individual, a friend of mine, someone I had seen in majalis here and there. I said to him, obviously you're a Shia, alhamdulillah. He said, alhamdulillah. I said, why are you a Shia? Why not a follower of an endless plethora of denominations and sects? Why not a Buddhist? Why not a Hindu? Why not a Christian? Why not a Jew? Why not a member of a 500 sect within Christianity and Judaism and so on? He said, I'll be honest with you, Sayyid, I don't know. Because my parents were Shia. And I said, well, that's a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, that you were born in a Shia household. That's a blessing that only a convert could understand and appreciate. But that was a blessing from Allah to set you on the right track. It wasn't the only thing that you need. The fact that you are a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, a lover of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the family of Rasulullah is only the first step. It's only the beginning. Now you have to know why. You have to have the evidence. You have to have the proof. You have to have a deductive approach to your religious beliefs. Why is that the case? The reason is, brothers and sisters, nowadays we're facing so many threats and dangers, I don't even know where to begin. People who take superstitions and trashy beliefs from the East and the West and package it to you as the religion of Islam, as the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. And this has been the cause of so much deviation. I met someone personally. I've met so many people who fit this description. But the most recent example was someone I came across, again in a particular country, I won't name it. She came to me, she said, Sayyid, my husband says he's a Shia. And he's identified as a religious Shia, but he doesn't pray, he doesn't fast. He has this thing where every month of December, he refrains from something that he likes. For example, he likes drinking coffee in the morning. He doesn't drink coffee in the morning. Every December, he says, this is my fast. I said, hang on a second. Which mantra does this guy follow? Actually, a more fundamental question. What flavor of weed is he smoking? Because whatever it is, it's the good stuff. I said, who does he follow? And she elaborated, she said that he follows a particular individual. Again, I won't get into the details. She said he follows that person and he says that he is the Mahdi. The Mahdi has reappeared. He lives in London. He doesn't speak a word of Arabic. He speaks English and he quotes the scripture from the Bible and the Torah. And he's the Mahdi. And he has told them that you don't have to pray anymore, you don't have to fast anymore, except for that weird kind of concoction in the month of December. You don't have to wear hijab anymore, you don't have to do any of these things. He says, I have come with a new religion that abrogates the religion of Islam. The same way Islam abrogated Christianity and Christianity abrogated Judaism. My religion cancels Islam. And I'm the Mahdi. And I'm like, so what's he supposed to do? What's his mandate? And his mandate is to fill the earth with justice and equity and cleanse it from oppression and injustice. I said, yeah, tell that to Gaza. He's sitting up there in London doing exactly what? Every single Muslim, forget the Shia, every Muslim knows that the mission of the Mahdi is to end oppression. What's happening? What's he waiting for? He's reappeared. He's risen. My point is that when you see a Shia who gets deviated and follows these kinds of imposters and charlatans, the reason it happens is because we don't have tafaqquh fi din. That we are minimalist Muslims, meaning we're content with the bare minimum. Yeah, I know the names of my imams, I know Tawheed, and I know Nubuwwah, and I know, that's it. That's it. Why is it that when it comes to material things, we're not minimalist Muslims? We want the best, we want the latest. But when it comes to our religion, the minimum will suffice. Why? Have tafaqquh. Have an evidence-based approach. As Amir al-Mu'mineen says to Kumayl ibn Ziyad, he says, An-nas imma muta'allimun, imma alimun rabbani. Either you're a godly scholar, أو متعلم على سبيل نجاة, or you're actively trying to learn and practicing tafaqquh, or همج رعاع أتباع كل ناعق يميلون مع كل ريح, or flies that hover above the nostrils of a sheep. When the wind comes, it pushes them in this direction or that direction. And if anybody calls and says, hey, I've got something interesting and beautiful, come, they all flock to them. They all run towards them because they have no knowledge. لأنهم لم يستنيروا بنور العلم ولم يركنوا إلى ركن وثيق. The Imam says because they haven't been illuminated by the light of knowledge and they're not resting their backs on a solid back, on a solid pillar. Have tafaqquh. On the question of tafaqquh, on the question of elevating your knowledge and understanding so that you don't fall for the deception of various people who are increasing in number, imposters, charlatans, deceivers, liars. Al-Mas'udi, in his Buruj al-Dhahab, he says that قِيلَ لِشَامِيٍّ, they told a person from Sham, هَلْ تَعْرِفُ عَلِيًّا? Have you heard the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib? He said, well, the name sounds familiar, but I'm not exactly sure who he is. أظن أنه لص من لصوص المدينة. I think he's one of the thieves of the city of Medina. Amir al-Mu'mineen himself says, he says, أنزلني الدهر. This world is such a circus that it brought my name down to the gutter. It brought me down and brought me down and brought me down حتى قيل علي ومعاوية, until people are now talking about Ali versus Muawiyah. Ali. You can't even put the name Muawiyah in the same book that talks about Ali. And here we're comparing these two. Or we have people who think Ali ibn Abi Talib was, God forbid, subhanallah. To compare someone like Khadijah to any other woman, including the other wives of the Prophet, is an injustice against Khadijah. We talked about her last night. I just wanted to mention her blessed name. As I said last night, Rasulullah loved anyone who loved Khadijah. He would receive this elderly woman. Aisha is the one who narrates most of these ahadith. Because she openly stated that she was envious of Khadijah, she would mention a lot of these instances and she would poke Rasulullah, she would provoke him. She herself says that I would become angry with the Prophet and I would intentionally disrespect Khadijah to him. Subhanallah. And so she says that لم يسأم رسول الله من ذكر خديجة والترحم عليها. Rasulullah would never cease, he would never stop, he would never be bored from mentioning the name of Khadijah and sending his blessings upon her and asking Allah to forgive her. She says that a woman once came, an elderly woman, and Rasulullah was someone who welcomed people with open arms. His akhlaq are exemplary. And yet this woman was special. Rasulullah came and he sat down and he put something for her to sit down, an elderly woman. And he spoke to her, he laughed, he smiled. So then we said, Ya Rasulullah, who is this woman? We've never seen her before. The Prophet said that she used to visit us back when Khadijah was alive. Meaning she reminds me of Khadijah. He reminds me of her. Subhanallah. Rasulullah, once, Hadith says that he came from the Mi'raj, and first thing he did was he went to see his beloved wife Khadijah, who, as I said, she's so oppressed that the only time Muslims speak about Khadijah is if they have a series about all the wives of the Prophet. She's a footnote to them. She gets mentioned only when others are mentioned, and by others we mean really just one. Subhanallah. The Prophet came and he visited Khadijah alayhi salam. And as soon as Khadijah saw him, she said, felicitations to you, Ya Rasulullah. You've just been to the Mi'raj. You have seen the extraordinary wonders of this universe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken you all the way to the seventh heaven, and you've witnessed paradise and hell and so on and so forth. Felicitations to you. Rasulullah said, no, felicitations to you, O Khadijah. She said, why? He said, because the last thing Jibreel told me before I descended was, he said, Ya Rasulullah, أبلغ خديجة عن الله وعني السلام. Convey to Khadijah the peace and blessings of Allah and yours truly to Khadijah. One hadith says, in fact, every time Jibreel delivered the message to Rasulullah in the lifetime of Khadijah alayhi salam, he would always end by saying, أبلغ خديجة عن الله وعني السلام. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Finally, Amir al-Mu'mineen says to his son, وعود نفسك الصبر على المكروه ونعم الخلق التصبر. Train yourself to be patient. Being patient means weathering the difficulties that come your way without getting too upset. So what if it's hot and the AC isn't on? The Imam says, train yourself. I've mentioned this before. My uncle, in his very humble home in the holy city of Karbala. He's a merchant himself, he's a grand Ayatollah. And he doesn't have an air conditioner. And so once he was asked, like, say this is Iraq we're talking about, where the temperature goes all the way up to 53 degrees Celsius. Let's install an air conditioner. He said, listen, I want to train myself. I don't want to get too comfortable. I want to be able to wake up in the middle of the night, partly because I want to wake up for Salatul Layl, partly because it's too hot and inconvenient and difficult. The Imam tells his son, Awwad nafsak. If you really want something, but don't get it just for the sake of training yourself, to be patient. The Imam says that's what you should do. Then he says, فَنِعْمَ الْخُلُقُ التَّصَبُّرُ. For the best etiquette, the best akhlaq, is to train yourself to be patient. You don't have to get everything you want whenever you want it. You don't. Because if that's your mentality, then you will be pushed further and further towards acts of transgression and sin, and your attachment to this world will become stronger still. We'll have to conclude. I said that one of the commandments of Amir al-Mu'mineen is to not accompany the people of evil, not to spend time with them. If you must, because they happen to be your immediate family members, then maintain a minimal contact with them. As our scholars say, the Maraja have stipulated this clearly. Maintain some form of contact. Call them every once in a while. Send a letter, say salam, that's okay. But to actually get into their lives and be immersed in their lifestyles, don't do that. Because what you might end up doing is what they call in Arabic takfir al-sawad. And takfir al-sawad is to embellish, to saturate the blackness. In other words, you increase the number of people who are committing acts of sin. A person by the name of Abdullah ibn Rabah, he says that I was in Kufa. I came across a blind man. And I heard that this man had participated in the killing of Abu Abdullah Hussein. So I went to him and I said, why are you blind? What happened to you? He said that there were 10 of us. It was a group of friends and accomplices, 10 of us, headed to Karbala to fight with Abu Abdullah Hussein. In the battle, he said, ما رميت برمح ما ضربت بسيف ولا طعنت برمح ولا رميت بسهم. However, because there were so many people that had ambushed Abu Abdullah in his camp, I never got to strike with my sword, to throw my spear, or to shoot an arrow. I was just there as a witness. I never got the chance to actively participate. And so we finished. Imam al-Hussein was killed. We went back to Kufa. That night, I saw a dream in which a man came to me and said, Ajib Rasulullah, go and respond to the Holy Prophet. I said, Wamali walah. What does the Holy Prophet have to do with me? Why does he want to talk to me? That man seemed angry. So he then took me from my collar and dragged me to this desert. He said the desert was all empty except for Rasulullah sitting on the sand, his sleeves rolled up, and a bucket in front of him. There was an angel standing next to Rasulullah. That angel was holding a sword that was made from fire. He then took my 9 companions, and Rasulullah commanded them to be killed. The angel struck each of them, and with every strike of his sword, they would be engulfed with fire and killed. Eventually Rasulullah said, come to me. I went close to him. I fell on the ground. I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, what have I done? He said, didn't you participate in the killing of my son Hussein? I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, but I never struck anyone with the sword. I never threw a spear. I never shot an arrow. So Rasulullah said to me, وَلَكِنَّكَ كَثَّرْتَ السَّوَادِ, but by being there, you increase the number of the enemy forces. The Prophet then put his hand in that bucket. It was filled with blood. He said, this is the blood of my son Hussein. He put his hand in the bucket. He took some of that blood and he smeared it on my eyes. When I woke up, I was blind and couldn't see anymore. I say, Ya Rasulullah, when you told this man that you increased the numbers, perhaps you were talking about the fear inside the hearts of Sakina. Imagine these little girls, the orphans of Abu Abdullah. There were 30,000 men that were covered with armor, with spears and swords. Imagine those men approaching Sakina and Ruqayyah, girls who had never come in contact with anyone but Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, Ali al-Akbar, al-Qasim, Abu Abdullah. Now these men are approaching them to hold their hands and tie them with chains.